Ladies, the women who influence the presidency, takes a look at our nation's first ladies as political partners with their husbands rather than wives and mothers. Tonight at 9 Eastern on C-SPAN. Well, the U.S. House is about to gavel in for the day, beginning with morning hour. Legislative business will get started at 5 p.m. Eastern with work on a number of land and water bills. And now live to the floor of the U.S. House here on C-SPAN.
The House will be in order. The Chair lays before the House a communication from the Speaker.
The Speaker's Rooms, Washington, D.C., June 17, 2013. I hereby appoint the Honorable Carrie Bentivolio to act as Speaker pro tempore on this day. Signed, John A. Boehner, Speaker of the House of Representatives.
Pursuant to the order of the House of January 3, 2013, the Chair will now recognize members from lists submitted by the majority and minority leaders for morning hour debate. The Chair will alternate recognition between the parties, with each party limited to 1 hour and each member other than the majority and minority leaders and the majority whip limited to 5 minutes each. But in no event shall debate continue beyond 1:50 p.m. The Chair recognizes the gentleman from American Samoa, Mr. Falamumbenga. Thank you.
Thank you, Mr. Speaker. It's American Samoa. Mr. Speaker, I ask unanimous consent to put for the full text of my statement be made part of the record.
Without objection.
Mr. Speaker, I rise today to denounce in the disparaging name of the National Football League's Washington, D.C. franchise, the Redskins, which I will refer to as the R word. The Native American community has spent millions of dollars in the past 2 decades to fight that racism that is perpetuated by this slur. Despite their best efforts, our Native American brothers and sisters' cries have fallen on deaf ears. Such an impasse is largely due to the widespread ignorance, lack of understanding regarding the history of this degenerating term. Mr. Speaker, I would like to share with my colleagues the painful and violent past associated with the R word. The origin of the R word is commonly attributed to the historical practice of trading Native American Indian skins, Mr. Speaker, Native American Indian skins and body parts as bounties and trophies. For example, in 1749, the British bounty on the Micmac nation of what is now Maine and Nova Scotia was a straightforward 10 guineas for every Indian Micmac taken or killed to be paid upon producing such savage taken or his scalp. Just as devastating was the Phipps Proclamation, issued in 1755 by Spencer Phipps, at that time Lieutenant Governor Commander-in-Chief of the Massachusetts Bay Province, who called for the wholesale extermination of the Penobscot Indian Nation. The Phipps Proclamation declared the Penobscot to be enemies, rebels, and traitors to His Majesty King George II, and required those residing in the province to embrace all opportunities pursuing, capturing, killing, and destroying all and every of the aforesaid Indians. By vote of the General Court of the province, white settlers were paid out of the public treasury for killing and scalping the Penobscot people. The bounty for a male Penobscot Indian above the age of 12 was 50 pounds, and his scalp was worth 40 pounds. The bounty for a female Penobscot Indian of any age and for males under the age of 12 was 25 pounds, while their scalps were worth 20 pounds. Historical accounts show that these scalps were called Redskins. The current chairman and chief of the Penobscot Nation, Chief Kirk Francis, recently declared in a joint statement that the R word is not just a racial slur or a derogatory term, but a painful reminder of one of the most gruesome acts of ethnic cleansing ever committed against the Penobscot people. The hunting and killing of Penobscot Indians, as stated by Chief Francis, Mr. Speaker, was a most despicable and disgraceful act of genocide. Mr. Speaker, such disgrace continues to live on through the Washington's franchise name. In a recent letter, 10 of our colleagues to the National Football League's Commissioner Roger Goodell said essentially that the use of the R word is meant to honor Native Americans. Baloney. He added, for the team's millions of fans and customers, the name is a unifying force that stands for strength, courage, pride, and respect. In other words, Mr. Speaker, the National Football League is telling everyone, Native Americans included, that they cannot be offended because the National Football League means no offense. Mr. Speaker, Mr. Goodell's casual and dismissive response is indicative of the racist history behind the Washington's franchise name. Its founder, George Preston Marshall, is identified by historians as the driving force behind the color barrier that existed for 12 years in the National Football League, a sad chapter from 1934 to 1945 when African Americans were prohibited from the league by playing in the gentleman's agreement they were not allowed to play. For years, Mr. Marshall changed the team's name from the Braves in 1933, and after the NFL's color line was crossed in 1946, Marshall's franchise was the last team in the field where African Americans were allowed to play, not until 1962. Might also add that Mr. Marshall did not welcome African American players with open arms. It was then Secretary of the Interior Stuart Udall and Attorney General Robert Kennedy presented Marshall with an ultimatum. Unless Marshall signed an African American player, the government will revoke his franchise use of the 30-year lease of the use of the stadium here in the District of Columbia. Mr. Speaker, today we find ourselves fighting the same racist threads that pervaded the Washington franchise for more than 50 years. We simply cannot continue to carry on hateful traditions that mock, belittle, disparage, and disgrace those of a different race because of the color of their skin. As a nation, we have come too far to fight for these rights that I think Native Americans deserve, have a better sense of self-esteem and dignity. And with that, Mr. Speaker, I yield back.
Gentleman's time has expired. Pursuant to Clause 12A of Rule 1, the Chair declares the House in recess until 2 p.m. today.
And as you heard, the House will be back at 2 p.m. Eastern this afternoon. Legislative work will get underway at 5 Eastern. Members will take up several land and water bills, and later this week they're set to debate a bill banning abortions after 20 weeks and the 5-year farm bill. Live coverage of the House when members return this afternoon here on C-SPAN. President Obama is overseas this week for meetings with G8 leaders.